Welcome everybody to another episode of Positively Trek. I'm Dan Gunther, and in this week's episode we are going to be talking about the new Star Trek Strange New Worlds novel, Ring of Fire by David Mack. And I'm gonna welcome a co-host that I haven't seen for a while back to Positively Trek here to join me in this episode to talk to the author, David Mack. I have Bruce Gibson. Bruce, welcome back. Good to see you.
I'm here. It's good seeing you. I can't remember the last time I was here.
It's been a little while. I was trying to think. I can't remember what the episode was, but it was a few months back. But
yeah, it has been too long. But yeah,
was it the last book with James Swallow? That might have been. It
may have been. That sounds about right. Yeah. But you know what? I'd be on more often if we had more books published every year.
Come on, people. Come on. I think, we've got, is there one? Yeah, there's one more this year, an original series novel coming, I think in December, but yeah, it's few and far between, which is frustrating, but we have a new one today to talk about. So, really excited for that. But first, Bruce, how have you been? What have you been up to?
Well, I've been, listening to Star Trek Con, so that's been great.
Also co-written by David Mack.
Also, yeah, exactly. And of course, reading this book. But outside of that, back in September, I directed a sketch comedy show, which was my first time directing, and now I'm acting in a sketch comedy show that premieres in November. So we start rehearsals. If anybody's interested, and they are in the Atlanta, Georgia area, you can look at sketchworkscomedy.com. And then in December, I'm doing the Diary of Anne Frank. I play Mr. Frank, father, and that's with Authenticity Theater. You can Google that if anybody's interested. That's also in Atlanta. So yeah, keeping busy.
Nice, that's exciting. I love checking out. There's a few things up on YouTube that pop up from time to time. So I'm subscribed to Sketchworks. So
nice.
I like to see when things pop up. So yeah, that's a lot of fun. That's really cool.
Yeah, maybe one day we'll do a Star Trek show. We'll see.
That would be cool. Talk to Aaron Harvey. Didn't he have like a Star Trek improv thing going on? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, he did. Yeah. I went to see them once. It was good.
Oh, cool. I haven't had the pleasure of that. That's cool. Well, let's jump over to our green room. We've got David Mack waiting patiently for us. Let's invite him in and talk about the new novel, Star Trek Strange New Worlds, Ring of Fire.
Ooh, Strange New Worlds. There's the book. I'm holding it. It exists.
Beautiful. Well, everybody, we have a very special guest to talk to this week. Of course, the author of the novel we're going to be talking about, Star Trek Strange New Worlds, Ring of Fire. We're very happy to welcome back to the show, David Mack. David, how are you doing?
Pretty good. Good to be here.
Excellent. Oh, we've all got it.
We got it. That means we've all read it or wrote it.
Yes. Read it or wrote it.
Well, actually, I wrote it, and then I had to read it like 5 times during production. So I've read it.
Awesome. Well, that'll make
mistakes still got through. I don't know how it happened.
Wait. We got to cover the mistakes. I want to know what those are.
That's for the readers to find.
Those are Easter eggs. Yeah, good luck.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, intentionally put there it's a treasure hunt. Yeah. Well, yeah. So, Ring of Fire. Strange New Worlds novel, as I said. Just as we'll start at the beginning of this to have it spoiler free. We'll just talk a little bit generally about the book, but we'll definitely get into spoilers later. Okay. As those of you who have listened to our book reviews know, that is kind of how we do things here. So
how you roll.
Exactly. This is how Positively Trek do. So
excellent.
We've got this novel set during season 3. And very specifically set during season 3 between the Salat who ate its tail and what is Starfleet. I guess, first of all, I want to talk about what was the process of writing this novel? How did you decide to kind of where to put it?
Part of it is that Strange New Worlds season 3, they started writing it like a year and a half ago. and the scripts were locked well in advance. It was already being shot and edited when I was writing the book. So when I was hired to write the book, I was given by my acquiring editor uh, all the scripts for season three, all 10 scripts, final versions. So I had those as my reference point, and I was able to go through them looking for both character and story inspirations, and also for continuity, trying to find places where within the season there could plausibly be a gap between the events of, say, this episode and that and the next episode, where one could sneak in a novel-sized story. So that was part of my challenge. And as I went through the 10 scripts and made notes, what I eventually found was that the best spot for me was between episode 6, The Salat Who Ate Its Tail, and episode 7, What is Starfleet? With some nods at near the end of my book to some little bits in episode 8, 4.5 Vulcans. So I had all the scripts, and I had a rough idea in my head of a plot idea that was inspired by real life events. I don't know if you're familiar with this. It was called Project Azorian. It was a CIA operation back in 1974. The premise was that a Russian submarine, K-129, had gone down due to some sort of accident and sank in the North Pacific in very deep water. The U.S., because of its underwater listening system called SOSUS, was able to triangulate and find the wreck before anybody else did. And they wanted to try and raise the wreck so that they could study it and figure out the current state then of Russian nuclear propulsion. But it's a very tricky thing to go and mess with some other nation's sunken warship. For one thing, a sunken warship is considered a gravesite, and you're not supposed to screw with that. So they had to be very circumspect. And the way they eventually went about it is they made it a civilian operation instead of a military one. And instead of having the CIA have anything publicly to do with it, they got a front organization. They went to reclusive billionaire Howard Hughes. And Hughes ostensibly financed the creation of this massive ocean platform called the Hughes Glomar Explorer. Its stated purpose was that it was going to go out into deep sea water, out into international waters, and that it was going to be a test bed for deep sea mining and oil extraction, that it was going to look for things like precious metals, oil, natural gas, that this was going to be a state-of-the-art resource extraction thing. And everybody figured, well, Hughes is rich and he's crazy and he's got all the time in the world to build something stupid like this. This is vintage Howard Hughes. Good luck, Howard. Have fun. Nobody thought for a minute, hey, maybe that's a CIA front. So the Glomar Explorer went out there. It found the wreck. They tried to raise it. Things went wrong. They ended up breaking the thing and it fell in pieces back to the ocean floor. They did salvage part of it, so the mission wasn't a complete failure. So I sort of just found this whole account of the K-129 and the Glomar Explorer and the secret operation masquerading as a commercial operation. I just found it fascinating. I thought there's got to be some nugget, some essence of a story there that I can turn into a Star Trek book. And so that served as the sort of the starting point. This story is not a beat for beat take on the Glomar Explorer story. I just use that as a jumping off concept and then built an entirely new story from there. But again, that's where the whole thing began, was the Glomar Explorer.
Wow, that's really cool. I like that. That aspect of the story really fascinated me. The whole the front for the civilian front, I guess, for it being a more military operation, but not.
Well, it wasn't military. It would have been like Federation Civilian Intelligence Services. I
Right.
mean, it was sponsored by the Federation government, but they had to appear to be hands off. So they run it through the Daystrom Institute, which is an academic, a neutral academic and scientific research facility.
Hmm.
I mean, and the thing is, I mean, although it's never really been touched on much in canon Star Trek, one would assume that just as we have military intelligence agencies working through our military, and then civilian intelligence, the CIA is not a military organization; it's civilian intelligence. Uh, we would have to assume the Federation has its own civilian intelligence bureau. So they were probably something like that would probably have
Hmm.
been involved. But since there hasn't been a lot of canon established about that, I just kind of skated around that. I'm like, let's not risk, well, let's not try to invent canon, and let's not increase the risk of getting contradicted by canon later. So I just sort of avoided all of that altogether. Then
Hmm.
the other fun thing was figuring out what elements of season three to bring into the story. And eventually, why I chose to put it between episode six and episode seven was that after episode six, Enterprise is pretty badly beat up. It would have needed time to go back into a starbase or a space dock, get some repairs. They'd probably want to do a shakedown cruise. They would give it a test run on some smaller missions first. So I'm like, okay, that seems like a good point because it's not clearly established in dialogue anywhere how much time passes between the end of episode six, the events of episode seven, or whether they occurred before six, and then the events of episode eight. There's no real clear timeline, which works perfectly for me. It works to my advantage because I can just say, yeah, it falls somewhere in there. And then I take all
Hmm.
these character threads, like what's going on with Spock and La'an and Chapel. They're sort of uh, three-way stress between their friendships that is going on because of relationship issues. And then I take, the storyline of Pike, which is touched upon in What is Starfleet during the Talking Head interviews, where he talks about the incident with the horse, but he just sort of glosses quickly by it. There were some more details about it that they wrote and that they filmed, but ended up not using. But I had that in the script, so I built from that. And then once I had that, I said, okay, I can see a parallel between that event and the event in my story. So I drew a thematic connection there. And then essentially Pike's whole story, his whole arc, is basically about doing what he has to do to atone for these past actions in one way or another.
One thing I wanted to talk a little bit about was when we talked to James Swallow about his novel Towards the Night.
Hmm.
I'm assuming kind of written under the same circumstances as yours, like he had access to the season 3 scripts and stuff. But according to him, a bunch of it, we don't know how much exactly, had to be kind of rewritten and tweaked a little bit because it ended up coming out before the kind of much delayed season 3 was.
Hmm.
So that created like a little bit of kind of extra work for him with his novel. But for years, you could almost say it was a little bit of a boon to you that season 3 was delayed because it came out so soon after season 3 and
Yeah.
just like fits so nicely with the season.
Yeah, it dovetailed right in. I understand where James's frustrations came from. Due to the delay, they didn't want him spoiling details about season three, so I think he had to write things to change the temporal setting of the book, and it was just
Hmm.
a real headache for him. And I totally get where he's coming from. Whereas I was fortunate in that even my original release date, which would have been in August, I think it would have been like right around the time those episodes dropped. For production reasons, unrelated to my contributions, the book had to get pushed back a little bit so that it didn't actually come out until October 7th. But even so, season three has not been that long in the rearview mirror, so it's still relatively fresh in readers' minds. They're still relatively up to date on what happened in Salat Who Ate Its Tail, What is Starfleet, and Four and a Half Vulcans. So as they read through and they pick up these little Easter egg moments in the book, particularly with regard to Spock, La'an, and Chapel, and also the stuff with Pike, they're gonna go, "Oh yeah, 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 I saw that. That was an Ep 7. Oh yeah, that was an Ep 6. Yeah. Oh yeah, that was an Ep 8 where she talked about that." And so I seeded all these little bits, um, taking little things like a little throwaway line at the end of at the end of episode 8, and turning it into, sort of my, if you know punchline for the end of the book with the whole Spock on story. Like, if you know, you
Hmm.
know. And even if you don't know, it's still sort of pretty funny. The whole bit with the socks.
Yeah, I laughed at that. I was like, oh, I think I know where this is going when he was trying to decide what to do with the socks. And is this unusual? Because I don't recall getting novels that take place during the current season. It's usually sometimes afterwards, right? I mean, have we had
Or
that before?
prequels.
Right.
It's unusual with regard to the new shows, just because the continuity and the timelines on the Secret Hideout shows have so far been very, very tight. And this went all the way back to Discovery season one. There's almost no gap in the chronology between any of the events in season one, except maybe between the pilot and then the second episode. Uh, there's almost no time gap between the end of season one and the events of season two. They just segue one right into the other. So if you're trying to write, a discovery novel, and you decide, hey, maybe I'll set it during season one. Well, you can't. There's really nowhere to put it. Almost every moment of their time within this given period is accounted for. And there's really not a lot of places where you can shoehorn in a new story. And it wasn't that Secret Hideout was trying to be difficult. This was not even on their mind. Why would they think about tie-ins? It's not their problem. Uh, this just, tight, good, solid, dramatic TV writing. But from a tie-in writer's perspective, what a pain in the butt. What a nightmare. There's no gaps. There's nowhere to drop things in. Like back with TNG, DS9, which were a little more episodic, a little less serialized, you could argue that maybe there was a gap between this episode and that episode, that maybe this could be just dropped in casually between these two stories, or this could be dropped in between the end of season two and the start of season three. Well, the new shows don't have that luxury. And this pattern continued with Picard, which had very tight chronology on season one, and then some indeterminate gaps between season one and two, season two and three. You saw it again in some of the animated shows. Again, the chronology very, very tight. And even to some extent, some of Strange New Worlds started out with this tight chronology, but at least as it moved back toward episodic storytelling, we were able to find little places to drop things in. But before this, the only thing we could really do on the tie-in side was write prequels, because you can't risk getting ahead of them. You can't do that. And you don't want to try and interfere with where they are now. So all we could do was say, well, let's dig into the background of this character or their backstory. Let's look at something that was mentioned in passing in the show, but is never going to get an in-depth on-screen exploration. Let's see where that takes us. And for instance, from that, I got my Star Trek Picard novel Firewall, which is all about Seven coming home with Voyager, finding that the Federation is not what she was led to believe, that she's not going to have the life she was told she was going to have. And so she has to go out and figure out who she is and find her place in the universe. And she joins the Fenris Rangers and yada, yada, yada. That's why we had so many of those types of books, is just because there was nowhere in the continuity where you could sneak in stories that were contemporaneous with what was going on in the show. It was just a kind of a freak of luck that between a writer's strike and COVID, enough delays piled up on Strange New Worlds that with season three just sitting there, completely written, mostly done, that those of us who were writing tie-ins had the time to go through, read the scripts, find places to drop things in. Of course, it screwed James because then the thing got delayed again, and you can't get ahead of the show. I got lucky in that my book was going to be scheduled to drop either just as the episodes were airing or within a couple of months after. And so for once, I got to write something that was just right there in the zone with the current season, which I don't think the books have ever really been able to do, even going back to the 90s, because there was always a lag. By the time the people writing the tie-ins knew what was going on, the season was over.
Hmm.
And then, the scripts were being written on the fly. They were doing 26 episodes a season. your biggest worry was that something was going to contradict you while you were in the middle of writing your book and you were going to have to throw all the pages out the window and do it again. That was the big worry back in the 90s. So yeah, even back then, it was very rare to see a book come out that was tied to the most recent season and fit within it and came out so soon after it. Usually you'd see like, around season 5, you'd have something set during season 2. So yeah, this was an odd duck by Star Trek Titan standards in terms of its
Yeah, because
timing.
that's usually what I expect when I pick up a new book that's following a current series. It's like, oh, this is probably going to be in season 1 or season 2, but it's like, oh my gosh, I just watched these episodes just weeks ago, and like you said, if it came out in August, it would have been right there with it. And I noticed in the acknowledgments that you said that you had a strong desire to write a Strange New Worlds novel. So I'm just wondering, what is it about this show that resonates with you?
I love the light tone of it. I really also kind of identify with the Pike character. He's this warm, loving, paternal presence at the center of everything on Enterprise in a way that Kirk never really was. Kirk was a leader. He was a commander. He was a figure who would command your respect, but he wasn't really like the father of the crew. You get a fatherly sort of vibe off of Anson Mount's depiction of Pike. I love that Pike is a chef. I mean, it allows me to, tap into my inner food nerd and the fact that I used to be a chef when I was young. I worked in and out of kitchens for years. I was actually an assistant chef at one point. So I'm able to funnel all of that sort of fun knowledge and make it come to life through Pike. Like I get Pike's mindset. I also just like the lighter tone of Strange New Worlds compared to say Picard or Discovery. There's a lot of sort of fun, light banter. Like they're not afraid to almost go for the it's almost vaudevillian repartee. It's almost, like Abbott and Costello jokes sometimes. So I'm like, okay, I get that. That's a pattern that I can emulate, whose style I know. So I enjoyed the action components of it. I like the fact that I recognize so many of the crew. And once I sort of got past the initial reservations about, well, is it a good idea to revisit Spock during this period? Well, actually, yeah, because one thing I had not considered and that they are exploring in the show is that this is the period of Spock's life where he is exploring the human half of his identity in what is essentially a safe space. Under Captain Pike, this paternal figure, this loving father that Spock never had with his own father, with Sarek, who was always the disapproving father. Under the tutelage of the loving father, Spock has a chance to find out what his human half is. What is the human half of his soul? What is the human half of his mind? He gets to know himself, and it's only through knowing himself that he is able to master all of the elements of his psyche to become the Spock we know in the original series and beyond. He has to go through this period of self-exploration to become the guy that we're going to know. And that's just something I hadn't considered before. And writing Spock as he's going through that phase in his life is a fun thing to do. It's intriguing just because I've never done it before. I hadn't considered it. But once you dig into it, you realize, yeah, this is actually psychologically a pretty exciting phase of someone's life to write. So it's stuff like that.
I kind of love the fact that it's the lighter elements as well of the show that kind of draw you to it. I mean, fairly or unfairly, you're kind of known for the
Angel
more
of Death.
darker, the angel, yeah. And so I love that it's that
But I'm
tone
also the
that
guy who wrote Waiting for Godot, where Zach Kebron goes undercover as a park statue. I
that's
mean,
true.
I contain multitudes, dude. Uh,
Absolutely.
I mean, I've tried to write humorous stuff, both for track and elsewhere. So, but yeah, I was drawn to both the lighter stuff. I like the fact that Chapel is made into a much more dynamic figure than she was in TOS. And so I enjoy all of the sort of relationships, and I like the fact that they avoid some of like the worst high school romance cliches. Like right at the beginning of season 3, there's a moment where I think La'an approaches Chapel because she has a question about Spock, and Chapel's like, "Oh no, you're not going to be one of those," And La'an's like, "No, no, 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 it's not that. No, there's no jealousy. This is not that. No, this is business." And it's like, okay, well, what do you got? So
Mm.
it was fun also because they had this interesting dynamic where what we see of them in this book is that Chapel's subtext is, I'm afraid that because I hurt Spock's feelings, our friendship is not going to be able to go back to what it was, and I'm worried that we've lost something. Spock's dynamic is, I want to make a better connection with La'an, but I don't know how, and La'an seems concerned that I still have feelings for Chapel. La'an is not really worried that he still has feelings for Chapel. Her concern is he wants something from me, and I'm not sure I'm ready to give it. And he's moving at a pace I don't really understand, and it just sort of all feels very strange because intimacy and trust are sort of foreign to La'an. This is, uncomfortable territory for her, and she's finding her way. And basically, everybody keeps misreading everybody else's signals, which is where all their tension comes from.
As always, Positively Trek is brought to you by its Patreon supporters, including Joyce Mirren, Brandy Jacala, Christina DeClercq-Zalagi, John Guppy, Out of Memory, Patrick Carlin, and Ricky Long. If you'd like to support the podcast, visit patreon.com/positivelytrek. You can join at any level and enjoy early access to episodes, ad-free episodes, episode shoutouts, executive producer credits, and more. Again, that's patreon.com/positivelytrek. Thank you so much to those of you supporting us. We truly do appreciate it. And now, back to the show. This is probably a good point to say that we're going to get into spoilers and kind of untether ourselves from having to avoid talking about a lot of the stuff that happens. So, let's jump right into this mission to this station, Cathara Station, which is proximal to this massive singularity. And of course, Pike was in the area 16 years earlier. And had this rather traumatic experience of feeling that he caused the destruction of this ship and the loss of 36 people.
37.
37, you're right. I want to talk a little bit about his mindset going into this, because like you said, he's normally the warm, fatherly, friendly figure. But in this, there's this pall hanging over him, and he goes into this without that kind of signature warmth and happiness. He's definitely more subdued and troubled by having to be here again. What was it like to kind of write Pike in a different style to how he normally presents himself?
My jumping off point for his state of mind in this story comes from where he was at the end of episode 6 in season 3, at the end of Salatu Ate Its Tail. The scene where he's talking with Kirk, and they're basically discussing, feelings of regret for things that, decisions you make, lives that are lost as a result of decisions made in command. And Kirk is just now beginning to get his first real taste of what that's like at the Starship Command level. And Pike, who is, sort of at this point the veteran, sadder but wiser, is sort of sharing that wisdom with Kirk. And you can tell there's something about Pike's demeanor in that scene with Kirk. And it basically comes down to the choices that Anson Mount makes as an actor, which are really wonderful. You feel like there is this unspoken freight of guilt and sorrow and lifetime of experience that Pike just doesn't talk about. Things he's seen, places he's been, things he's done, people he's lost that he just doesn't talk about. That's what you feel in that scene. You feel like this is a guy who has been through some stuff, and he's carrying some weight that he doesn't like to let other people see. So I decided to dig into that, and the other half of that inspiration comes from episode 7 during the talking head interviews when he talks about the horse that he accidentally kills as a teenager, during this thing on the farm, and the sort of regret he felt over that. And if you know anything about Pike, and you know that he grew up, riding horses and revering horses and whatever, you have to imagine, like, I've known people who loved horses and were big into that sort of activity. The reverence, the bond that comes to be between a person and a horse, uh, it's really quite profound. And then you have to imagine that for someone like Pike to have this beautiful creature that he's just trying to bring home, and through just either negligence or incompetence or whatever, or too much enthusiasm, he winds up killing it. This is a major psychological wound. This would be like for most people if you accidentally killed the family dog. This is a beloved creature. This is a creature of respect. And here he's killed it through an accident, and he can't undo this. And how did the accident happen? Because he was trying to impress and win the approval of a male authority figure, a father, or the father of the girl he liked or whatever. But he was trying to win someone's approval, and it goes wrong, and the horse dies. Years later, second officer, third in command aboard the Shadowlet, on night watch, this incident happens where suddenly an unidentified ship doesn't heave to when it's ordered. It starts to run. He chases it down. They put a tractor beam on it while it's trying to hide in the accretion disk of the black hole. It's clear the ship is under terrible stress, but he won't let it go. He won't give the order to cut the tractor beam. Instead, he keeps telling the comms officer, tell them to cut their engines. Tell them to cut their engines. And they don't. And then suddenly the ship blows up. And he realizes on some level, I've done it again. To earn the approval of authority figures, in this case, his captain, Captain Scaliger, and maybe the XO, and to a more general degree, Starfleet brass, in order to win the approval and impress authority figures, he has gone too far. He has used too much force. And as a result, this time he's killed 37 people. From his point of view, and he doesn't know who they are. Maybe they were good guys, maybe they were bad guys. Doesn't matter to him. Those were 37 lives. Whoever they were, wherever they came from, all he knows is I gave orders, those orders were followed, and as a consequence, they died. I killed 37 people today. And he has to live with that. And his captain, they put him through an Article 32 hearing. There's a review. The Starfleet reviews the whole incident. Yada, yada, yada. Evidence is presented, testimony. They look at tapes. They look at sensor logs. And he's fully acquitted. And they say, no, you did everything by the book. You did your job. You did nothing wrong. You gave all the right orders. You gave them a chance to stand down. This is on them. You're fine. Well, sure. You can tell the guy you did nothing wrong. You're fine. But in his head, he still knows I killed 37 people. And that's going to stay with him. And he has to live with that. It doesn't matter that they tell him he did nothing wrong. In his head, this is Pike. This is a very empathic man. Uh, Empathetic, I should say. He's just not going to get over this. He's going to live with this. This is going to be one of those things that's going to define how he goes forward as a commander, as a captain. He's always going to have this in the back of his head. When you give orders, you've got to be prepared for the fact that sometimes you're going to get people killed, and sometimes you got to know when to back off. And at the end of the story, since we're in spoiler mode, you see that essentially what happens is that he has to relearn this lesson that there are times you hang on, there are times you don't let go, like when you're trying to save the station. But there are times when you do let go. There are times when doing the right thing, even if it costs you the approval of authority figures or society or whatever, sometimes doing the right thing is more important. So when he stands up to Scaliger and Starfleet Command at the end, and they say impound that ship, and he says, no, I'm not going to do that. That's illegal. It's an illegal order. It's immoral, and I'm not doing it. And eventually he stands his ground, and Scaliger accepts the arguments that he puts forward. It's because Pike has finally internalized the lesson. Impressing this guy isn't what's important. Doing what's right is what's important. That's what matters, and that's what Starfleet is supposed to be, and that's what I'm supposed to be. I'm supposed to be doing what's right, not what I'm ordered to do if it's wrong. And that's the core of Pike's arc in the book.
I love that image at the end as they're watching the ship go away. And you know, from the way you've described it, Pike's seeing a Bronco galloping away into the distance. And it's just lovely.
Plus, all the little comments, like you go and you see everybody's sort of like making their little comments at the end right before the ship goes. Everybody's talking about it from their vantage of what they think is interesting about the ship. Like Ortegas marvels at how it handles. Scotty's wondering what powers that thing. Someone else is wondering, I wonder where they came from. And Pike says, all that matters is, thanks to us, they're going home.
I also love that it was Anson Mount's performance that informed a lot of that, because Pike really is the master of that 1,000-yard stare when he's talking. Oh, he's so good at that.
Oh, Anson Mount is wonderful. He's just wonderful.
One of the things that occurred to me in what you were talking about, and when I was reading the book, you said about the inspiration for his character. A lot of that came from episodes. A lot of this came from episodes 6 and 7 of season 3.
Yeah.
But I kept thinking about the cage and how he's talking about the lives and who lives and who dies. And I mean, I guess even from just that statement in that episode has informed the writers of Strange New Worlds to go in this direction.
Although they chose to write him in a more charismatic mode than, say, what you have with Jeffrey Hunter. Jeffrey Hunter had a very sort of cold, hard, I am the man in command sort of thing. He didn't exude that feeling of warmth and charisma and bonhomie that you get from Anson Mount's performance. Then again, one could argue that was because Jeffrey Hunter represents Pike before the incident at Boreth, where he touches the time crystal, and Anson Mount represents the soul of a man who has seen his future and knows what's coming, and has had a perspective shift. He's had a paradigm shift in his understanding of what his life means, how much time he has, and what the weight of his decisions is going to be. This is a guy who's had his entire understanding of himself and his place in the universe completely altered in a fraction of a second during the Boreth incident in Discovery Season 2. So, yeah, one could argue that maybe they are the same guy, and they just represent a guy who has literally been through a life-changing experience and has changed his priorities. Who's realized my time is short. I've prioritized the wrong things, and I'm going to start making corrections here. So, yeah, you sort of see some of it in the cage. But yeah, it was really that conversation at the end of episode 6 where I just felt like, wow, now I really feel like, you can feel the weight of the world that Pike is carrying, and that he just doesn't want to lay on to anybody else. He carries it because he doesn't want his crew to have to do it.
The provenance in this book is quite interesting to me, and we're not really given a full story of the background of this ship, but I'd like to know, what are the origins of this ship? Or what can you tell us about the ship that we didn't get from the novel that was in your head? Is it from the future? Who are these people?
Well, I decided to leave it vague on purpose. I knew that it was a time ship, obviously, and we can see that from the mechanics of how it works and what happens when they try to do this strange jump effect that ends up splitting it temporally into 3. I mean, I guess from my point of view, they probably are from the future, but for all we know, maybe there was a technologically advanced society in the past. Maybe they started in the future and resettled in the past. Who knows? Certainly some of the descriptions of things about their ship and the mention of a thing called a temporal prime directive certainly hints at 29th century involvement. So I was thinking about stuff like that, but again, for the sake of maximum flexibility and adaptability to changing continuity, I chose to leave as much undefined as possible. And part of what lets me get away with that, in my opinion, is that because the crew of the Provenance and particularly Valkeya they're not going to want to say or reveal too much to people in a different setting who are not cleared for this knowledge. They're going to be very coy about it. They're not going to advertise where they come from or what year they're from, because they're trying not to bias events.
So, without saying like any giving any more information. Did you have something set in your mind when you were writing them, or was it as kind of flexible in your mind as well as on the page?
I mean, I guess I was trying to keep it flexible in my mind. I wanted
Mm,
it to be a sort of a thing where the answer could go either way. The whole point was that they are evasive, they are mysterious, they are, uh, and we're supposed to be wondering, are they our friends? Are they not our friends? Can they be trusted? Uh, what's their deal? So I wanted to sort of, again, it was mostly about maintaining a sense of mystery and about not over explaining. I think, there's a danger in over explaining every detail in a story.
mm,
Sometimes the more you try to tie things off with a little bow and explain every detail and explain every little touch, sometimes it's just too much and you wind up expending time on details that actually turn out to be not that important, and you slow down the narrative as a process. Sometimes in your zeal to try and hang a little, tie a little bow on every little thing, you don't realize it, but you end up creating a bunch of internal contradictions. Um, the more details you establish in with hard specificity, the greater the risk that you're going to contradict yourself, you're going to contradict canon, or that somebody else is going to come along and contradict you later. The more you leave open to interpretation, the more flexibility you leave yourself, the greater the chance that the story will continue to hold up against future readings and future developments in the canon and also in the tie-ins.
Yeah, I didn't miss the detail. I don't want you to think that. I'm reading the book on, wait, I don't like this. I don't know more. I just was curious what was going on in your head. But I do want to hear you kind of explain. I think I understand it all, but the echo, the ship is like an echo ascent, what, 16 years in the past and 16 years in the future, right? Wasn't.
Yeah. What happens is you have this moment where, as they're exploding, they're attempting to do a temporal jump, but the ship explodes. It basically undergoes a tripartite fracture, so that you have the version of it that's stuck in the moment, in the present, where it explodes. And then, and that's what, 2244. Then a temporal echo of it gets thrown backward to 2228, approximately. And the other one gets thrown forward to 2260 or 2261, somewhere in there. These numbers are approximate. But yeah, essentially they get thrown, one gets thrown forward, one gets thrown back. The one in the middle is lost. The one at the end is lost, but two people escape alive. That's Valkeya and Sven. So they make it out. They realize where they are. They are from the past projection. So they realize we've got a shot here. We're going to try to set in motion a series of events so that when the future projected one comes out in 2260, we're going to be there ready to make sure it doesn't get destroyed. And at least one iteration of our ship and crew, as we knew them, is going to survive this incident. And so the whole purpose, the whole thing that they're doing is once they realize where they are, they track from where they arrive to when they know the incident occurs, again, from their perspective. They figure out the exact interval. Now they know the exact forward interval, and they know exactly where and when to be to save their ship and their shipmates.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty cool because I don't recall ever seeing that situation in Star Trek before. And it made me wonder what would happen if the ship in the past did survive and caught up to the ship in the future and both crews, old and young, exist at the same time. And then you have that's a whole nother book for another time.
That's another story. That's a temporal paradox of some kind. Who knows?
Timey-wimey.
I did. I really enjoyed the character of Valkeya, and at first, like through the first half of the book, basically being frustrated, not as a reader being frustrated, but being frustrated along with the crew of the Enterprise at every turn to try and figure out what the heck's going on. I kind of like that we're carried on that journey with them, but by the end of this book, this character is totally different in my mind, and like just the coolest person for having persevered for all this time and pulling off this feat that is pretty incredible. Were there any specific inspirations for this character or anything you drew upon in writing her?
I think a little bit. I mean, some inspiration may have come from the character in the TV series version of 12 Monkeys.
Hmm.
The German woman scientist who sort of knows the most about the Splinter jump program, and she sort of persists all the way through the finale of the series. And so she's sort of, this impressive character who has a lot of layers, who at some points you think might be a villain, at some points you don't know what she is. Uh, but in the end, you realize she's just this multifaceted, complex character who eventually does turn out to be a force for good. But man, you really have to wonder sometimes along the way, along the journey. So yeah, I think that character, although her name escapes me at the moment, I think that might have been a little bit of what was in my head for Valkeya. And in terms of who Valkeya is, her ancestry, I sort of picture her as like mixed ethnicity of Vulcan and Argelian. So she's got some Vulcan, DNA, but she probably has Argelian culture, which is love is everything, love is the law, empathy is important, yada yada yada. As you remember from Wolf in the Fold, the Argelians are sort of a hippie culture in a lot of ways. They're big into empathy and they're big into love and they're big into not feeling jealousy or envy or possessiveness or whatever. So I imagine Valkyria as sort of having been raised with that value set.
And then, of course, her partner through all this, Sven, who we don't spend a ton of time with, just at the very beginning a little bit. But
But we've seen in some flashbacks and
yeah, I felt her, the weight of her loss, of course, in, only having one person to kind of share this secret with through her whole life, and then ultimately losing him
mhm.
very shortly before the culmination of all of her plans and stuff. That was it was a tragedy that I don't think you fully appreciate when you start the book, and then by the end, once you realize everything and it all comes together. I guess I'm saying this book I feel would do really well on a reread as well, kind of picking those little hints,
Yeah.
the 16-year parallels that, like, oh wait, that was the same, like, oh, the project started then, oh.
And you begin to realize that, all the things were set up, all the pieces were established, all the rules were laid out. And for instance, that's how we pay off the action sequence at the end of the book with the Klingons. As the Klingons are coming in to deal the
Right.
coup de grace and finish us off. We're like, how the heck is Pike going to get out of this one? And Pike and his ship are ready for the aftershock, which the Klingons don't know is coming. It's like, yeah, we got hit by the foreshock, and then we get hit by the shock. And now that we understand how this phenomenon works, we know there's an aftershock coming at an exactly the same interval. We just got to make sure that when that interval happens, we're in the right place and the Klingons get lured into the other place. And wham.
That was clever. I enjoyed that.
Like Dan, I was a little annoyed with Valkyria there at the beginning because the rest of the crew is kind of annoyed with her and she's not being forthcoming with information. But then I feel like we took a journey with Unich and Riley with her relationship with Valkyria because Una eventually, she's annoyed with her, but then eventually finds common ground and offers her guidance. And I was wondering if you could tell us more about that evolution of their relationship.
Oh, well, I mean, they're obviously the parallel that I found while writing the outline is that these are both women who are burdened by secrets that could ruin their lives, ruin their careers, uh, and get them, in theory, could have gotten either one of them put in prison, put in a lab as a research subject, questioned endlessly by Starfleet intelligence or God knows who else. Um, these are both women who have had to carry secrets that, are just a magnitude greater than what most people have to deal with. In Una's case, the fact that she's Illyrian, she's augmented, she's got all this stuff going on in her DNA, and then of course with Valkyrie, the fact that she moves through time, that she's a time traveler. that she has knowledge of events in the past that have perhaps been lost to us. She has knowledge of events in the future that we aren't haven't seen yet. She knows of technologies we don't know, and she's got to be very careful to make sure that there's a set of precedents that you can follow as she invents the things she needs to invent. She can't just invent them out of whole cloth. It's sort of like when you're in math class and the math teacher says you've got to show your work. She's got to show her work. She can't just jump to, and a miracle occurs, and now we have time travel. No, she's got to start with, all right, what do these people have? Where are they technologically? How do I get them from where they are here to where I need them to be here in 16 years? Over 16 years, how do I get them technologically from A to Z? How do we do that? And that's her challenge. And so the fact that they both carry this terrible burden of secrecy, and they both know what it's like to lose somebody you trust. So when once Una starts to figure things out, and Valkeya makes the choice to confide in her, that's when Una's able to see, we have this common ground. I understand now where she's coming from. I see myself in her. And once she's able to communicate that to Valkeya, then the trust becomes more mutual.
The other thing that kind of piqued my interest about Valkeya was the end of the story and kind of where does she go now? Like what's next? Because she figures, well, I'm probably going to get fired because the mission wasn't a success. But you
The
mentioned
Starfleet Corps of Engineers is hiring.
exactly, and the Starship Lovell, which I remember from the old SCE novels, the 23rd century iteration of them, and it was so much so, like, Valkeya was such a kind of fully realized character in this novel. I started questioning. I was like, was she in those stories? And I actually had to Google. I was like, oh no, okay, she wasn't. But it made me think that, like, if this were the heyday of the 90s, Star Trek publishing, like, oh, we'd flip over to SCE and see her continue her adventures over there. So
Actually, that would have been in the aughts.
right, yeah, sorry, yeah, you're right. But
SC premiered in '01.
that would have been really cool, and like that was such a fun corner of the Star Trek universe. Do you have, like, I not plans, but do you have any ideas of where the character could go if you could continue to write her?
Nope, gave it no thought.
Fair enough.
She's going to go on to other things. I mean, part of what you sort of accept in storytelling, uh, every story has backstory, whether you intended to or not. There's always something that had to have happened before that set events in motion. Every story has backstory, and every story, in theory, unless you've ended the world, blown up a timeline, has post story where you say, and the characters either live happily ever after, or the rider gets back on his horse and he rides into the sunset, and tomorrow he'll find another town and help another person. So there's post story, and so you don't always have to explain everything about post story. You don't have to lay out, and then like you don't have to pull a Tolkien. And she went back to the Shire, and she had 4 children, and did this and that. And they begat that. And this person began that one, and this one did that, and then they bought a split level Brogan. No, you don't have to do that. You can just say, you can just imply with one question: do you know if the SCE is hiring? And from that, you can spin out your own theories. Hey, maybe she joins the SCE. Maybe she does it under an assumed name. Maybe she joins the, maybe she's fired from the Daystrom Institute. Who knows where she goes next? So there's part of the fun is just leaving it undefined, leaving possibilities open for the reader to imagine. Let them fill it in.
Or you can come
Again,
back to it later. You could be writing a novel years from now and you're like, you know what? I can go back to that shipping crew or those characters because that would fit right into this.
if the opportunity were to arise, if it were the right story, the right conditions, sure, in theory, I could
Yeah.
revisit it. We could meet the Provenance crew again in another tale. If let's say I was hired to write a Department of Temporal Investigation story at some point. Uh, sure, in theory, I don't have any plans for it. It's not
Right.
on my radar. It's not what I intended. I didn't, leave this, dangling story thread thinking, yes, and now I must write an SCE story about Valkyrie. No. Again, if it's the right story, but right now I have to be more concerned with the fact there's only a few Trek books being published each year. And to get hired to write one, you have to be responsive to what the editors and the licensor need. What are their publishing priorities? Which series are at the forefront right now? What do they need? What are they looking for in terms of stories? What are they looking for in terms of series? And so, right now, there's nothing that's a priority that would fit with pitching an SCE story. Um, so I just don't really think about it. Again, I just sort of let the characters have endings full of possibilities.
Well, I think it should be a priority that we have more Star Trek novels published in a year, but that's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying.
Hey, I wish we could go back to the days of, two a month. That was a heady time back in the 90s.
Oh
That was
yeah.
some crazy stuff. I'm sorry I missed out on the heyday.
If I were God Emperor of the Earth. Other stories that we've got going on in this novel that we definitely want to touch on. Pelia and Scotty have an interesting little back and forth here. I wonder if you wanted to talk a little bit about their kind of battle of wits / Scoville heat units, I guess.
Mm. Well, what I saw in the scripts for season three is there's this sort of mounting rivalry between Scott and Pelia. They seem to butt heads, lock horns over everything. And it's interesting because, Scotty starts out as an innovator, and Pelia seems like something of an innovator. She is pulling weird stuff out of her hat all the time. She's got, we find out she's a hoarder. She's got all this stuff she used to keep in a warehouse in Vermont. Now it's packed into her quarters on the Enterprise. She's got things like, old hardwired rotary telephones. So she seems like a bit of a improvisational pack rat. But at the same time, this is the same woman who was chewing out Una and others for not doing things the way she taught them at the academy. And supposedly she was this taskmaster at the academy. Uh, so which is it? Is she a stickler for regulations, for by the book, for protocol, for the way of doing things? Or is she a complete kook who just flies by the seat of her pants? Well, the answer is Pelia does whatever gets the job done in the moment. Pelia will improvise when she has to improvise, and she'll use by the book when by the book seems the best way to go. I think what she's doing here with Scotty is she's realizing that Scotty is in this mode of development in his career as an engineer where he seems to function well under pressure improvisationally, but he comes up with these unorthodox solutions that, while great in the moment, are probably not going to be terrific long term. She needs him to develop more disciplined practices to become better at the by the book side of engineering, even though she clearly doesn't care. She obviously doesn't care about by the book engineering. If you look at her through season three, this is not a person who cares. So why does she care with Scotty? Because she knows it's what he needs. She knows that if you take the improvisational engineer who built this thing during the Gorn invasion on Parnassus or whatever, he doesn't even know how the heck he did it. He just did it because he had to. And now when you ask him to recreate it, he's like, yeah, I don't know. She has to take the guy who has that sort of inspirational ability and get him to marry it to replicatable engineering prowess. She knows he has the capacity for both. She needs him to have them in equal measure. It's like having an atrophied left arm and an overmuscled right arm. He's great with this one, but he can't do anything with this one. She needs this one to come up equal to this one. And the only way to do that is to push him to get that skill set balanced out. So she's pushing him on the by the book thing. And she knows part of it is that you've got to, you got to get him angry. You got to put him under pressure. So she tries the whole thing with the hot peppers to sort of apply pressure. And also because I needed a comical C plot. So she applies pressure with the peppers and the Scoville heat units. This allows me to have things like, Scotty vomiting on the deck and calling Sam Kirk a shag lip ditty.
I did
And
enjoy
also,
that.
I love that. And I also have the part where he has to lisp out the fact that he's dying. I want to say something clever, but my tongue is swollen. So I have to write that, with, lisping consonants. But the whole thing is to get him into this by the book mentality. And then, of course, also just to make sure that, you got to see a glimpse of the Scotty to come. The Scotty to come, you don't want to tick Scotty off. He's a guy who will get you. And he'll get you in creative ways. And we even see a hint of this when Pelia is first chewing him out, saying, and I suppose this accident with the quartermaster's, head, the lavatory reclamation system backing up into that was an accident. And Scott is like, well, it was completely an accident, which would never have happened if I hadn't had a low blood sugar incident due to him not giving me my, French toast or whatever because it was 11:02 and he said brunch was over. So he's clearly carrying a grudge over petty stuff, and he pulls pranks like this. And because we established that at the beginning, it should be very easy to see what he's going to do to Pelia when you get to the end. Especially once Mbenga figures out, oh crap, she's really hurting this poor kid, and she doesn't even realize what she's doing. Huh. And of course, we've also seen enough of Mbenga to know he's got a little bit of the jokester in him too.
Mm. And the result is weaponized ginger ale, which I enjoyed as well.
Yeah.
But everyone knows that. Really? Huh, my bad. Yeah.
Well, now the whole thing with the peppers, the eating the hot peppers, is that something that from a personal experience of yours that you've done that?
Not with those peppers, no, because it would kill me. I'm sort of with Scotty in that regard. I had like a stomach hemorrhage when I was like 30 that put me in the hospital. I nearly died, nearly bled to death internally. I cannot eat that kind of spicy food. I mean, it will kill me. I cannot eat stuff like that. Highly spicy stuff, habaneros, ghost peppers, Carolina Reapers, all that sort of stuff. Not for me. I don't mind smoky. I'm happy with chipotle, a little liquid smoke, whatever makes the barbecue tasty. But once people start saying, "Oh, you got to have this, incredible hot sriracha," I'm like, no, I don't. I really don't. No, no, I don't. I've got my Alabama sweet barbecue sauce. I'm just fine. Thank you.
I did like Scotty's. Of course not. I'm Scottish. Can you deal with hot food? That was
good. I'm Scottish. I don't know if you heard the clip of Robert Petkov reading a selection from the audiobook. The excerpt they use for promotional purposes is when Pelia is chewing Scotty out near the beginning of the book, and Scotty tells that story about why he pranked the quartermaster or the galley master. And Petkov's reading of it is just perfect. He nails it. And he takes that scene and just elevates it and makes it even more hilarious than it was. It's really quite a bit.
Awesome.
It's quite a thing. Petkov is really great.
I've heard really good things. I don't tend to do audiobooks. I have too many podcasts that I'm listening to, but I keep hearing that he really does do really amazing things with the material. So I'd love to check one of those out sometime. Sounds like this one might be the one to do it. Like I said, this would stand up for a really good reread. So maybe that's how I should do that.
Yeah, worth a shot. Give it a try.
So we've got one more character to talk about here. Bruce, why don't you do the honors and talk about our favorite half Vulcan?
Yes, so Spock. Okay, here's the thing I'm wondering. Okay, so there's a scene where Spock is pounding on this Klingon's head, he's have this emotional outburst. And I love that as an opportunity to explore Spock's emotional side that, of course, Vulcans do have feelings deep down inside, but his feelings are
very savage. They have savage primal emotions. The reason they have the whole dictums of logic is because if they don't, they are murderous maniacs.
Yeah. And this part, I mean, his emotions are fueled even with Lon, his feelings for her and in protecting her. This reminded me of Into Darkness when he was pounding Khan with Uhura there. And Dan says it reminds him at the end of All Those Who Wonder with the Gorn. So I'm just wondering,
That was when they lost, I think, unnamed. Well, they named him, but we hadn't seen him before that. This ensign, and of course Hemmer at the end of that episode, and Spock is in the corridor and just pounding the bulkhead into like a warped, twisted metal, and Christine comes upon him there. I imagine what's going through her head is similar as what she sees here.
Well, the thing that really sort of underscores what's happening here in Ring of Fire during that scene when he takes on the Klingon in the mess hall is that while he is savagely hitting this guy like 5 times in the head, the thing that really scares the living crap out of both La'an and Chapel is the fact that Spock's face is completely blank as he's doing it. There's no emotional expression on Spock's face. He's cold, he's logical, but he's also brutal. And they've never seen him do that before. And part of what's implied here is that, yes, he, says he's over Chapel, and yes, we can just be friends, and he's trying to make all these overtures to La'an or whatever. But, this Klingon puts a weapon to Chapel's head and says he's going to kill her first. Basically openly and outright says, in a matter of minutes and seconds, this one dies. And so this is what's going through Spock's head is that this, I don't know if I'm allowed to use New York vocabulary on this show, so I'll just skip over that. This guy was going to kill Chapel. And Spock snaps. He just snaps. He gets in close. He gets enough of the Vulcan nerve pinch to take the guy down. And then he knows Klingons have a lot of fortitude. They are very durable, hardy things. You can't just assume he's going to stay down. You got to make sure he stays down. Well, Spock really makes sure he stays down until somebody has to pull Spock off and go, I think you got it. I think you got it. So, but yeah, this was basically meant to imply, and this comes up again just briefly near the end of the book when Chapel is talking about this with Mbenga, who is the ship's expert in Vulcan physiology, Vulcan psychology, Vulcan medicine. Like, what does this mean? How do I interpret this? And Mbenga, all he can really tell her is, look, just be glad Spock's on your side.
Yeah.
That's all I can tell you. Just be thankful for that. But the implication here is that, although he says, he's fine and he's not envious of Dr. Corby and he's not jealous about losing, Chapel's love and yada, 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 on some level, he's still stinging over Chapel. It still stings. And to have somebody threaten to kill Chapel right in front of him, that's a good way to get your ass beat in by Spock.
Yeah, it was definitely a brutal scene. And it didn't occur to me, of course, that is the big difference between Spock in those previous scenes and the one we see here is his face is a rictus of rage in those other scenes. But yeah, this time
here he's
more terrifying. Yeah.
It's just like it's just cold. It's like you threatened Christine. I'm going to crush your skull now.
Yeah.
But later he throws a bowl of soup at her in the original series, but that was something else.
Well, that wasn't that what the Side 2000? No, that was Ponfar.
Yeah. That's right.
Come on, that's forgivable. He was going through Ponfar. I mean, come on, that's
yeah. We've all been there.
Who hasn't thrown a bowl of soup during Ponfar? Come on,
right?
Come on.
It's Campbell's biggest period of the year. Yeah. Speaking of Spock, and I guess Ponfar related, we touched a little bit on this, but I just want to bring up the socks in Lon's drawer at the end again. I loved his whole mindset through that, like logically thinking it through, like, oh, I read that this is a phenomenon, and this will surely show her that I wish to pledge my life. And I'm like, oh God, Spock, stop.
And of course, what's great is that, again, this is under the heading of if you know, you know. At the end of episode 8, when Una finally coaxes it out of La'an, why are you being weird? What's going on? What happened? And La'an says, he left socks in my apartment. Dirty socks? No. Clean socks. Rolled up in a drawer. He put socks in an empty drawer in my quarters and left them there. What does that mean? What do I do with that? And of course, Spock had it all reasoned out. He thinks this is the grand romantic gesture that La'an has been waiting for him to make. And instead, it's just weirds her out. She's like, I don't know what to do with this. So
Yeah.
again, it's a great thing is if you've seen episode 8 and then you read this book, you're like, oh, Spock, oh, Spock.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
it makes perfect sense. He lays out the case. Like, yeah, okay, sure, it looks good on paper, but oh, Spock.
Yeah, that line of thinking, like Lon's not privy to that, Spock. You've really logicked yourself into a mess here.
Yeah, if you were going to leave the socks, you probably should have left a memo explaining your chain of thought on this one, because she's
Yeah.
not going to get it.
Well, I guess to wrap up the discussion of this novel, I have to say I loved it. I thought it was really good. I saw a review online saying that this might be the best story set in season 3. I disagree. I actually really enjoyed season 3. I think a lot more than some people did.
But
But
this was a lot of fun.
oh yeah, the Salat who ate its tail, I think, is for my money still the best episode of Strange New Worlds so far. Like I love that episode.
It's a pretty good ep. I don't know if I think it's the best of the series so far, but it's a
Mhm.
solid episode, a solid entry. I mean, I like the Wedding Bell Blues one with Trelane a lot more than other people did. I thought that was
Yeah.
a wonderful comic bit that had like callbacks to Tapestry, as well as to the Trelane episode from TOS. I mean, I thought there was a lot of really good, just classic physical comedy and classic film comedy going on in that episode.
Mm.
It works so much better than it has any right to. And they worked hard for that one. They went through a lot of drafts. A lot of writers worked really, really hard to get that episode into the form that we finally got to enjoy. And I'm happy to say I really feel like it was worth it. And I'm glad they did the
Hmm.
work.
Oh yeah, I loved that episode too.
It was tremendous fun, tremendous fun. And it's so touching at the end with the whole bit about the sun and moon and stars and whatever. And I was like, oh, that's great. That's beautiful. That's
Yeah,
really
Yeah.
nice.
Mm-hmm.
absolutely. But yeah, your novel I think is up there too. Like I really enjoyed it. I think I love how nicely it fits in, which is like you said, something that in this modern era we don't get too often. So that was kind of a special little treat. And
It could
yeah,
almost be like a
I
2 hour
really liked
movie
it.
wedged into the middle of the season.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And it was great, to focus on that relationship of the characters and what the characters are going through at the time, as opposed to just, a flat out story. It's like we're really
Mhm.
digging into the characters. And it sounded
Yeah,
like them.
I mean, the whole point of the crisis of doing a crisis like this is to put your characters under stress so that you can find out what's bothering them. That's really what the core of this type of storytelling. The plot is the plot, and it serves its function, but ultimately, it really ought to be about revealing something about the characters who are involved in it.
Mhm.
That because it is under pressure, it is through action that character is revealed.
Definitely. Well, a winner in my book for sure.
Same here.
Thank you, very kind.
I do have to bring up, uh, we've lost, as you mentioned, a few very important people in the Trek publishing world in the last year, and one of them, of course, being Margaret Clark, the amazing editor for many years for Star Trek novels at Pocket Books, and
30
I have to
years.
say, yeah, oh, incredible. And I really appreciated your words about her in the acknowledgments at the end. It was I was really appreciated. She was incredible. So
Yeah, I'm just disappointed she never got to read the manuscript of this
yeah.
book. I worked with her to develop the story outline. She commissioned the book from me. But by the time I turned the manuscript in, I didn't realize she was already hospitalized at that time. And so she was in no condition to read it at that point, and she never really recovered. Um, and so she never got to read it. And so I would always wonder whether she would have enjoyed this as much as I would have hoped. Uh, we'll
Mhm.
never know. And of course, we also lost Peter David and author Peter Morwood, who was the husband of Diane Duane and a Star Trek author himself.
Mhm.
So yeah, it was quite a year of losses for the Star Trek literary community.
Definitely, and I mean their mark on Trek publishing. It's going to be felt for years as people continue to read these books and stuff. So yeah, definitely missed. It's going to be a big hole for sure. I guess before we get to the usual discussion of what else you're working on and where other people can enjoy your work and what's coming up, the big elephant in the room, of course, is Star Trek Con, which we still have 2 episodes. Well, by the time this comes out, fewer than that. But yeah, Star Trek Con with Kirsten Beyer with a story by Nicholas Meyer. What's that been like to work on? And what should we be looking forward to with the final episodes?
Well, I'm not going to spoil anything about the final
Darn.
episodes for you. I mean, well, I know there's a sniper somewhere over there that's watching me and just waiting for me to slip up. But working on the show, working on the scripts with Kirsten Beyer was a terrific experience. It was a learning experience uh, to work with her as the showrunner. And basically, we were just a two-person room. We were working virtually through a shared application, an online application, to sort of plot it all out, develop our outlines, etc. My job was write the first draft scripts, and then she would write the revisions and deal with all the notes from the studio. And then I would give late notes on the late version scripts. But keeping up with Kirsten during a brainstorming session, it's hard. She is fast. She thinks 1,000 miles an hour. And by the time you try to get an idea out, she has figured out what you're going to say, and she's already on to the next thing. And you don't even get to finish your thought. She's already said, okay, I get where you're going, and boom. And then we move on. And it's like, okay, and I'm never going to complete that thought because she already read my mind. And we keep going. And you have to keep up because she's that fast. And so it was a level up experience for me learning to keep up with her in a story development setting, and then just learning to write scripts at a level uh, good enough that it would not be a waste of her time to then rewrite. Because she doesn't like to write the first drafts. She'll do it when she has to, but she prefers, if she's got a co-writer, let someone else, put the first version of it down on paper, get the bad version written, and then she can come in and she doesn't mind rewriting. She loves rewriting, which is hilarious because I hate rewriting. I go through everything to try and get the first draft the way I like it, and then anytime someone asks me to change something, it ticks me off. Whereas she doesn't like to write the first draft, she just loves to go in and take other people's first drafts and rip them apart and rewrite them. So it was kind of a chocolate peanut butter situation. Uh, we worked out really well together in that regard as a team. We had a lot of fun on it. I mean, there were moments of frustration. It was work, it was a job. But at the same time, it was also an honor to work on this thing that had meant so much to Nicholas Meyer, who had put years of his life into it, to have this story concept that he had worked on and know that there were certain specific elements and story bits that we needed to honor, that needed to be preserved from his earlier work into our work. Even though we were sort of we were trying to like do a do-over, just starting from blank pages. But at the same time, we knew that there were elements of what he had created that had to come forward. So sort of learning how to manage that, to take our vision and learn how to bend it to work and fit with his vision without compromising either. Again, another terrific learning experience. So far, we've been pretty happy, I think, with how the podcast has been doing in terms of listenership and the number of people who've been sort of listening to it and downloading it. My hope is that it will be successful enough by whatever metrics the production companies are using that they'll want to do more of these. I have ideas that I would love to do either solo or with Kirsten, preferably with Kirsten. I would like to write some more of these. I had a lot of fun. I learned a lot, and I feel like I could do an even better job on the next one if we got another shot. So that's my current thinking about Con.
Nice. Well, I mean, I'm enjoying the heck out of it.
Well,
It's
everybody
been
did such
so
an
good.
amazing job. Naveen Andrews, Ren
Yeah.
Schmidt, but of course, Kirsten, is really the MVP here. I mean, she so much of what made it through, that made it what it is, comes from her and comes from our director Fred, and the sonic development team over at Realm, the people who did the music, the people who did the sound effects and the Foley work. Like there's a whole team of like audio artisans over there who brought it to life. But I think really, the two people who have to really be singled out, I mean, other than our performers, are Fred, the director, and Kirsten. I think the two of them were really the driving creative energy during production, who brought it to life and just gave everybody else what they needed to get there.
Yeah, I put it on my headphones. I turn off the lights. I make sure my wife's not home, and I listen to it. Except one day she came home early and scared the crap out of me. But that's how I enjoy it. It's just she goes, "I thought you were dead. You weren't answering when I was saying your name." I'm like, "I was listening to Khan."
Okay.
Wow. All right.
It's just my own personal problems. I'm sorry.
All right.
So do you have anything else you're working on that our listeners would be interested in, Star Trek or otherwise, that you can talk about?
I've got two things that I know are coming down the pike, but neither has been officially announced, so I'm not really supposed to say too much. I can say that I have an original short story coming out in a new anthology next year. The anthology was edited by Henry Hertz, who I worked with before on an anthology called Combat Monsters. And that turned out really, really well, and I enjoyed working with him. So when he contacted me about his new anthology idea, which I also love, I jumped on right away, and I wrote a story that I'm very happy with, and I'm looking forward to readers getting a chance to, enjoy that. And I have a book that I've just started writing. I'm still finding my way with it. That is under contract, so it is going to be my 40th published novel. And I have another project, an original that my agent is shopping around and trying to find a good home for. I don't know if that one will ever see the light of day, but it's an original. It's out there. It's seeking a home. We'll see what happens.
And where can people follow you if they want to keep up to date with what's going on?
Well, the best place to find whatever I have coming up or to read my bibliography is my website, davidmack.pro. It has a press kit page for everything you'd ever need, like a bio or sample book cover images, author photos, information about awards I've won, all that good stuff. Anything you'd need to know about promo stuff right there on the press kit. And there's a bio page, and under the About section, there's interviews. So if you want to see how I've blathered and run off at the mouth, either in audio or on video or just in print, there are 20 some odd years of interviews listed on that page. Some of them might be dead links by now. I should probably go through and check those now that I think about it. But in theory, there's 20 years of accumulated interviews that span, the basically the entire time of my prose writing career, and probably interviews that cover every book I've written during that time. And beyond that, if you just want to see me getting, angry about current events and using my New York vocabulary to maximum effect, you can follow me at Blue Sky at David Mack. I may update that at some point to davidmack.com. Also on Blue Sky, I have a work-only account, davidmack.pro on Blue Sky. And that one, just Star Trek stuff, new books, new short stories, no politics, no personal ranting, no bullshit. The other one, again, tons of stuff like that. But, on the other hand, you also get pictures of cats and otters. So that's the trade-off. Take some swearing, get some cute animals, put up with some political swearing.
Absolutely. I mean, a greater combination has never been invented, I think. So
I think it's the heart of entertainment right there.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We really, truly appreciate it. We always love talking to you. Thank you so much. And thanks for this great book, too.
That is awesome. Thank you so much.
And Bruce, thank you for coming back for a book club episode. We really appreciate you having you back on the show as well.
It's nice coming back every once in a while and talking Star Trek and talking to David and you, and just, let's keep that going.
Absolutely. More to come, for sure. Well, thank you everybody out there for listening or watching. Remember, we're also on YouTube now, so thank you for joining us, and until next time, as always, stay positive. Positively Trek is produced and edited by me, Dan Gunther, and co-produced by Barry DeFord on Treaty 8 territory, the home of the Beaver, Cree, Dene, and Métis people, whose histories, languages, and cultures we respect. We acknowledge the many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit who have lived in and cared for these lands for generations.
See you